play the game of dots and boxes, first, set up the game. To do this, first get a piece of paper and a writing utensil. Players can either share the writing utensil by passing it back and forth during the game, or they may each have their own writing utensil. Players may also use their own individual color if they choose. So one player could play with a red pen, and the other could play with a blue pen. But different colors are not required to play. Next, players will draw their dots on the paper. To do this, first, they must decide on the grid size they would like for the game. For a shorter game, players can play on a smaller grid, such as this 3x3 grid. For a longer game, players can start with a larger grid, such as this 10x10 grid. The grid does not have to be a square, so they could also play with a rectangular grid. After deciding on the grid size, players will draw their dots on the paper. The dots will be used to make squares, so players should make sure the dots line up both vertically and horizontally. If players would like to add variety to the game, they can play on a grid of a unique shape. For example, instead of using a rectangular grid, players could play with a triangular-shaped grid. Or they could play with a different shape, such as a cross. They could even make a circular grid with a hole in the middle. While getting the hang of the game, it is best to start with a basic square grid. For the purpose of this video, we'll use a 6x6 grid. After setting up the game, players are ready to begin playing. The game of dots and boxes is a game where players are drawing one line between two dots, either horizontally or vertically. They are both attempting to complete boxes for themselves and also trying to avoid allowing their opponent to complete their boxes. The game is often played with 2 players, but it can easily accommodate more players. If more than 2 players are playing, a larger grid may be needed. To start the game, one player will be named the start player. The start player will start their turn by choosing any 2 adjacent dots, horizontally or vertically, and connecting them with a line. They may only connect 2 adjacent dots, and they may not connect them diagonally. After that player creates their line, the other player will do the same thing, connecting any 2 adjacent dots, either vertically or horizontally. Their line may be placed anywhere, and does not have to connect to the other player's line. Players will continue taking turns, connecting 2 dots on the grid. Anytime a player draws the 4th line that completes a box, that player will claim that box. To claim a box, that player will put something inside of the box to indicate that it is theirs, such as putting their initials inside of it, writing their name, or if they are using colors, shading that box in their color. So blue drew their 4th side of this box and claimed it as theirs. A player who completes a box will also get to take another turn. If they complete another box on their next turn, they will get to take another turn. During the game, it is possible that a single line played by a player can complete 2 boxes at the same time. If a player's line completes 2 boxes, they will claim both of those boxes. Because they claimed a box during their turn, they will also get 1 extra turn. It should be noted that they will not get 2 extra turns for completing 2 boxes. The game of dots and boxes ends after all of the dots on the grid have been connected, and there are no more possible connections that can be made. After the game ends, players will count up the boxes that they claimed during the game. The player who ends the game with the most boxes will be the winner. To play the game of Sim, first, set up the game. To do this, first get a piece of paper and 2 different colored writing utensils. Different colored pens, such as a red pen and a blue pen, work perfectly. Each player will choose one of the colors to play the game with. If players do not have 2 different colored writing utensils, they can also use different lines, such as one player playing with solid lines and the other playing with dashed lines. After choosing their colors, players will draw 6 dots on the paper in the shape of a hexagon. Players can make the hexagon as large or as small as they choose. It will just have to be large enough to draw a line between 2 opposite points on the hexagon. A single sheet of paper can fit several games of Sim, so it is best to make smaller hexagons. After setting up the game, players are ready to start playing. The game of Sim is a quick and easy pen and paper game that requires players to alternate drawing lines in their color and avoid making a triangle. To start the game, one player will be the start player. That player will draw the first line. The only requirement is that their line is a straight line between any 2 points. They may connect 2 dots on the border of the hexagon, or they may connect any 2 dots on the inside of the hexagon. So let's say red decides to connect these 2 dots. They will draw a line between the 2 points in their color. After the start player connects their 2 dots in their color, the other player will take their turn. That player may connect any 2 points of the hexagon that have not already been connected. Their line is allowed to cross their opponent's line. After blue makes their line, red will make their next line. Both players will continue taking turns, connecting dots that have not already been connected. As players draw more lines on the hexagon, they will have to start checking for triangles. The object of the game is to avoid making a triangle on the hexagon, in your color. After a new line is drawn, each player will carefully check for a triangle in that player's color. The triangle may be large, such as this one, or small, such as this one. But it must be in one player's color to count. So this would not count as a triangle because it has 2 blue sides and 1 red side. The game of Sim ends after a triangle in one player's color has been created on the hexagon. The player who completed the triangle will lose the game, and the other player will be declared the winner. To play the game of Sprouts, first, set up the game. To do this, get a piece of paper and 2 writing utensils. If you only have 1 writing utensil, both players can share it and pass it between each other. Players may choose to use 2 different colored writing utensils, so they can see the different moves they use during the game. Next, players will decide on the amount of dots that they would like to use for the game. For a shorter game, players can use less dots. For a longer and more complex game, players can use several dots. The dots should be dispersed around the paper, but they do not have to be in any particular order. After setting up the game area, players are ready to begin playing the game. The game of Sprouts is a game where each player is trying to be the last player to connect 2 dots. They will connect dots by drawing lines either between 2 dots or a single line that circles around and connects the same dot to itself. After creating their line, they will add a new dot to the game. To start the game, one player will be named the start player, and they will take the first move. On their turn, they will choose to either connect any 2 dots on the paper, or they may connect the same dot to itself. After they create their line, they will create a new dot somewhere on the line they just created. The dot does not have to be placed in the middle of the new line, but there must be at least some space between the original dot and the new dot that was created. After the first player creates their line, the other player will take their turn and create their line. Once again, they may connect any 2 dots, or they may connect the same dot to itself. After drawing their line, they will create a new dot on the new line they drew. While connecting dots, there are a few rules that players must follow. Each dot in the game is only allowed to have 3 lines drawn from it. A 4th line is never allowed. So this player could not connect a new line to this point, because there are already 3 lines coming from this dot. Lines drawn on the paper are not allowed to cross each other, so this line would not be allowed. On their turn, a player may either connect one dot to itself or two dots to each other. So a player could not make a line that connected more than two dots. After drawing their line, that player must always draw a new dot on the line they just created. The new dot must have at least some space between it and another dot on the line. So you can't draw the new dot on top of the previous dot. The game of Sprouts seems easy, but it is actually a complex game. Even a small game can provide many different gameplay experiences. One thing that makes the game unique is that as long as the line you draw doesn't break any of the rules of connecting dots, you may draw the line in any way you choose. For example, this player could connect this dot to itself like this, or like this, or like this. In the same way, a player could connect two different dots like this, or like this, or like this. They can strategically draw lines to help them win the game. The game of Sprouts ends when there are no more legal moves that can be made. So in this game, there are no more legal moves, because each dot has 3 lines coming off of it. In this game, there are no more legal moves, because these dots cannot be connected without crossing another line. The last player who is able to make a legal line in the game is the winner.